All right, get ready, because today we're diving into some pretty deep waters.
Hmm.
Um, we're going to be talking about something that seems kind of strange at first, but stick with me.
Yeah, this one might sound a little out there,
Yeah.
but it's all about the connection between, like, your soul
Okay.
and your wallet.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So how about spending thousands of dollars on NFL stuff?
And-
Ever thought about that?
I mean, I've definitely seen people who are really, really into the teams.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And to get to the bottom of this, we got to turn to a philosopher from way back, Maurice Blondel, early 1900s guy.
Okay, now hold on. Philosophy on a show about spending habits? You sure about this?
Trust me, it gets pretty wild, Blondel. This guy, he was onto something big, something that's still relevant to how we live today.
I laid on him.
Blondel, he believed there's this hidden force that drives everything we do. He called it volonté volante, which is fancy French for the will that wills itself. Basically, it's this deep down yearning we all have for something more, something bigger than ourselves.
So it's like this constant push, even if we don't realize it's there.
You got it.
Hmm.
And here's the kicker. Blondel said this whole will that wills itself thing, it's spiritual at its core.
Ritual, huh?
Yeah, like a yearning for something divine, for like the ultimate truth and meaning.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this. But what does all of that have to do with how we spend money, especially on something like NFL merch?
Well, see, Blondel also said that sometimes this spiritual yearning, it gets kind of messed up. Instead of leading us to like real spiritual fulfillment, it gets channeled into stuff that leaves us empty. He called this messed up yearning superstition.
So it's like trying to quench your thirst with salt water. You think you're satisfied, but it's not really what you need.
Boom, perfect analogy. And the thing is, Blondel saw this superstition popping up everywhere, not just in like old school religious stuff.
You're telling me he thought being a sports fan could be one of those things? That's a pretty bold statement.
It is. But think about it. The NFL, the whole structure, the rituals, the crazy fans, even their super detailed rule book, it's all in the NFL Constitution and bylaws.
You know, I actually looked through those bylaws recently, and it's insane how much detail is in there. It's not just about the game. They cover everything. Players, trades, money, even what colors teams can use.
Exactly. And all that meticulous detail, it hints at something deeper. Going back to the fans, the way they go all in for their teams, the emotions, the time, the money, it's almost like, well, a kind of worship, you know?
I see what you mean. It's like, for some people, the NFL has kind of taken the place of traditional religion.
And that's where Blondel's idea of superstition comes in. He wouldn't say enjoying a game is wrong, but he'd want us to think, what's the real reason we're so into it? Is it just the excitement of the game? Or is there something deeper going on that we're not even aware of?
Maybe a desire for something more spiritual, something that touchdowns and jerseys can't really satisfy.
You got it. But to figure out how big this whole thing really is, we got to look at the numbers. How much are people actually spending on all this sports entertainment?
Yeah, let's get into that.
Well, there's a report called Consumer Expenditures that breaks it all down. It shows that in just 2023 alone, Americans spent a huge chunk of their income on entertainment, including sports. We're talking games, merchandise, streaming services, the whole 9 yards. Billions of dollars, easy.
Wow, that's a mind-blowing amount of money.
Hmm.
And when you compare that to what people give to religious organizations,
Yeah,
it makes you wonder.
doesn't it? Like, think about it. Religious organizations, they get the biggest share of charitable donations in the U.S.
Right.
But the sheer amount of cash flowing into the sports world, it's just crazy.
It really puts things into perspective.
It does. And this brings us back to what Blondel was saying. Is it possible that at least some of this sports spending comes from a misplaced spiritual longing? This desire for something more, for meaning, for purpose, that you just can't find in wins and losses?
It's a question that makes you stop and think. Could Blondel's idea of superstition help us understand not just our spending habits, but also other parts of our lives today? I mean, is this bigger than just football?
You're catching on. And to really dig into that, we need to look at what Blondel saw as the true path to being spiritually fulfilled. The path that takes us away from superstition and towards a real connection with something bigger than ourselves.
And that's where the Gospel of John comes in. I'm really curious to see how this all ties together.
Yep. The Gospel of John, it's like a counter-argument to finding fulfillment in things outside of yourself. It emphasizes a relationship with God, aligning your will with His will. That's where real joy and purpose come from.
Okay, I'm ready to dive deeper into that. Let's see what the Gospel of John has to say about all of this and how it connects to Blondel's ideas. This is about to get really interesting.
See, the Gospel of John, it's all about showing us this, like, divine word that's behind everything,
Hmm.
creation and all that. It's through this word, which became a person in Jesus, that we really understand God and what our connection to him is all about.
So it's not just about following rules or rituals, but like a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we're meant for.
Exactly. And in John, there are passages like in John 6:40 that talk about this yearning we've been talking about, this will that wills itself. Remember, it says, for this is the will of my Father, that everyone who beholds the Son and believes in him will have eternal life, and I myself will raise him up on the last day.
So it's saying that our deepest desire, that wanting something more, it's actually a desire for God.
Right on. And that real fulfillment, that eternal life, it doesn't come from like temporary stuff or things you can buy. It comes from having a relationship with God through Jesus.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of what Blondel said about superstition, how it's like we're misdirecting our spiritual energy.
Absolutely. And John 13:15-16, that really hits this home too. It's where Jesus says, "For I have given you an example, that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him." This passage shows us the heart of Christian morality. To live like Christ lived, not chasing after stuff or quick thrills, but showing the same selflessness and love that Jesus did.
Which is definitely not the vibe you get from the whole professional sports world with all the competition and stuff.
You said it. And it's not that we can't enjoy things like sports, but the gospel makes us ask ourselves, why are we doing this? Are we looking for real fulfillment or just trying to fill a hole in our hearts with something that won't last?
So if we're stuck in this superstition thing like Blondel talked about, how do we get out of it? How do we shift our focus and start living in a way that matches our spiritual desires?
Well, the Gospel of John gives us a good place to start. Look at John 14:11-12. It says, "Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me. Or else believe on account of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. And greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father."
So it's not enough to just believe. We have to actually do something about it, put our faith into action.
Exactly. And the works Jesus is talking about, those are acts of love and helping others. It's following his example, being humble, showing compassion, and putting others first.
Which, let's be real, is pretty different from how things usually go in the world of pro sports.
It is. It might seem tough to shift our focus from getting stuff to serving others, but the truth is even small changes can make a big difference.
Like, what if we took just a little bit of the money we might spend on NFL gear and gave it to a charity that we really care about?
That's a great idea. And there's a report, the U.S. Charitable Giving Statistics Report. It shows that even small donations, when you add them all up, they can have a huge impact. It's interesting that report points out that older folks, even though they often have a limited income, they're some of the most generous givers.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like as we get older, maybe our priorities change and we start to understand what others need and what we really long for ourselves, spiritually speaking.
Exactly. It's not just about money, though. It could be volunteering, being a mentor, or even just being more present and caring towards the people in our lives.
So it's about moving from me to we, from taking to giving.
Yeah, and from looking for happiness and stuff to finding it in real connections and helping others.
Yeah.
And remember when we talked about how we use our time, the data from Time Use Our World in Data showed that we spend a lot of time on leisure activities, right?
Right. I remember that.
So imagine if we chose to spend even a little bit of that time on things that feed our souls, things like praying, meditating, being out in nature, connecting with our community. These are ways to really nurture our spiritual lives.
You know, I don't think Blondel would tell us to stop watching football completely or never buy another jersey.
I agree. He'd want us to understand what's really behind those actions, What are we hoping to get out of it? And then he'd encourage us to find better ways to satisfy those desires.
So it's less about what we're doing and more about why we're doing it.
Exactly. Are we looking for real connection, purpose, and something bigger than ourselves? Or are we just trying to ignore those deep desires?
That's a question that really makes you think. And it makes me wonder about all the other parts of our lives where Blondel's idea of superstition might be showing up. Man, this deep dive has really taken us on a journey, hasn't it? We started with NFL merch, and now we're talking about, the meaning of life.
It's pretty wild how connected everything is, huh? Even something as basic as spending money can tell us so much about what we really want deep down, about what we value.
Yeah, it really shows how everything's tied together. And I think Blondel's idea of superstition is a really useful tool for looking at ourselves, It's not about beating ourselves up for liking certain things, but about being aware of what's motivating us, what we're really searching for.
Totally. It's about asking the tough questions. Am I spending my time, energy, and yeah, even money in a way that lines up with what I truly believe in? Or am I just settling for things that make me feel good for a minute, but ultimately leave me feeling empty?
And what happens when we realize that some of our habits, like spending a ton on sports stuff or maybe something else entirely, might be a form of that superstition Blondel talked about? Where do we go from there?
Well, I think the Gospel of John gives us some pretty solid guidance. It's about shifting our focus, from ourselves to others, from always getting stuff to giving back, from trying to find happiness in things to finding it in real connections and helping others.
It's like a call to action almost, a challenge to take control and make our own lives better.
It is. And it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing. Even small changes can make a difference. Like, what if we decided to spend a little less on something that doesn't really matter to us and gave that money to a charity we believe in?
Or maybe it's about carving out some time for things that feed our soul, like finally starting that meditation practice we've been putting off or spending more time out in nature.
Exactly. It's all about making choices that reflect what we truly value and that bring us closer to that spark of the divine within us, that wills itself that Blondel talked about.
As we wrap this up, I want to leave our listeners with a sense of hope and a feeling that they can make a change. Understanding Blondel's idea of superstition isn't about feeling bad about ourselves. It's about realizing that we have the power to create lives that have real meaning and purpose.
It's about recognizing that we have choices. We can spend our energy chasing after things that don't last, or we can invest in things that truly nourish our souls and connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
And remember, true fulfillment isn't something we just stumble upon out in the world. It comes from the choices we make and the things we do.
The more our choices line up with our values and our spiritual goals, the more we'll experience that sense of purpose and joy that Blondel believed we were all born to have.
So let's go out there and live with intention. Let's be mindful of how we live, how we spend our time and money, and how we nurture our connection with the divine.
Let's be the architects of our own lives, using the wisdom of the gospel and the insights of Maurice Blondel as our guides.
And who knows? We might just find that true fulfillment is a lot closer than we think.